So give me some more details about your career. So how many years were you working on TV? What did you do? And then when did you switch to radio or from radio and producing?
Yeah, honestly, it started since I was a little kid. I was the child, and granted, it was that honker of a VHS. I would carry it around and I would interview my family. I'm not even kidding. Or when you listen to the radio, everyone would make mixtapes. I'm obviously a child of the 90s. Play and record, but instead of the average mixtape, I had this little plug-in microphone and I would DJ in between the songs. So the seed was planted, and I actually, even when I was a little kid, very into dramatics. Public speaking competitions were my jam. Terrible at sports. Public speaking was where my specialty was. And then it was about high school. You know, when you would do a project, they would have these case studies. And in one of the case studies, the girl that was depicted in it was a journalist. And that's when the spark sort of twisted in my brain that, oh, there could be a career path that I could go here, and that big aha moment. So I was kind of lucky because I knew what I wanted to do since I was a little kid. It took shape. I went to school for broadcasting, radio, television, and film. And it was time to do an internship. And they were like, you can go anywhere. And I'm like, do you really mean you could go anywhere? Has anyone ever gone abroad? So I actually interned in Christchurch, New Zealand at Canterbury Television. And it was one of the best decisions that I ever made because it was a very small station. They'd never had a random Canadian show up at their door. So they threw me into the fire. And before you knew it, I was behind the scenes doing big studio camera. And by the end of the internship, they actually let me do reporting in the field. Granted, adult braces, green as can be, but I came back home with this like confidence for some reason that was like, I've made it and I'm going to make it. Needless to say, sent out resumes constantly. That's when you realize you don't quite have the experience yet. And I really wanted to travel. So I found out about a job called Port and Shopping Guide on cruise ships. And that's how that ended up happening. So I would travel 6 months out of the year. I would do these shopping talks for about 1,000 guests a cruise. You had a TV show internally. And it was a wild experience. I will say, if you've ever cruised, what happens below deck, very different than what happens above deck. Yeah. It's a whole different world. But came back once again thinking, how do I get my break? And that's where local radio is where I started. And I was more on the promotion side, but again, really wanted to be on air. So they finally gave me a weekend show. I remember the first show, I was quite literally screaming in the microphone. I get a call from the production manager being like, hey, just speak normally, please, because I've given you that opportunity, but you're so nervous. Did that for a little while, and then it would have been when I was 25. I had wanted to work at the Weather Network so badly, which sounds funny now because we have weather apps, but at the time, you genuinely would tune into a television station to think, is my drive going to be terrible or not? Am I going to get snowed on or not? It was a big fabric and a 24-hour channel people tuned into. So I applied every 4 months consistently, declined, ghosted, didn't hear anything, kept trying. I was adamant because I never wanted to do hard news. I knew that about myself. I was way too bubbly to be that serious 100% of my career. So eventually, I think they just were like, this girl's not going to stop. Let's just get her in here for an interview. I show up to the interview. No idea that they were starting a traffic app. So you have to keep in mind, at the time I lived in a little town in Niagara-on-the-Lake, used the MapQuest GPS to get there. And in the middle of the interview, they go, okay, stand up and give us a traffic report.
Ooh.
Yeah, immediately I'm like, I have no idea how I even got here. I don't know any of the roads in this big city. And they can see the panic. And I'm like, I just decided, be honest in that moment. And instead they were like, well, you lived in New Zealand. Can you give us a 1-minute monologue on your time in New Zealand? Okay, perfect. Except the nerves were so in me. I remember I got in my car, bawled the whole way home. I was like,
you thought you had screwed it.
This job. Oh yeah. I was convinced that completely went off the rails, but apparently they were suckers for punishment. And that was how I got in and had an incredible career with them and made a few leaps in between. And overall, I did live national or major network television for over 10 years.
Wow.